So welcome everyone. We have 49 people, 50 people and counting. So this is a great attendance. The Americas Coaching Supervision Network is pleased to introduce Karen Pratt. She's calling in from Cape Town, South Africa. And Karen is a transactional analyst expert. And so I'm really excited to hear from her. Her topic is a transactional analysis perspective on working positively with parallel process in supervision. And so I also know Karen, we've known each other for a few years in different venues. She's just a recently new grandmother, so we can relate at that level, although I can't believe he's 15 months old now. And also Karen is a singer. And so she's recently been able to go back into singing. I know some of you are singers as well, in a actual group setting with physical distancing. So without further conversation, I'm going to hand it over to Karen.
Thanks, Lillian, and thanks, Damien, for the invitation to share with you something that is really dear to my heart. And don't fear, I'm not going to sing tonight. That was just an aside, so you get a sense of what sets my heart on fire, as well as doing coaching and coach supervision. So here is what the topic is about, as Lily has said. And what to kind of get do a contract, I'm going to share some TA frameworks with you. And then there'll be two opportunities for you to have some discussion with each other in smaller breakout rooms. Lily will organize that. So I'm going to hopefully stimulate your thinking around how two models from TA can really inform how you think and work as a supervisor. And I invite you to couple with the frameworks with each other in the small groups, engage with them, bring yourself into the models. Often when people hear about TA models, they go, oh yes, I actually do this already, but now I've just got maybe a different framework to think about what I do. Or maybe it's going to offer you a slightly different framework. So I'm trusting that as professional supervisors, we will bring ourselves authentically, respectfully, and keep the confidentiality of what might be discussed in the breakout rooms. So what is this thing called transactional analysis? I want to position first what TA is, where it comes from, so you can get a sense of its roots and what's at the heart of TA. Eric Byrne was the man who promoted it. Those are his dates. And in a nutshell, it's a theory of human development, personality, and communication. So it's got two aspects. It's got the intrapsychic parts. What's the meaning we make of who we are within ourselves? That's the invisible part, if you like. But then the interpersonal piece. So how does this show up in our relationships? So I'm sure already you might be going, supervision, what's going on in the supervisory relationship? And how does that relate to the inner world of our supervisees? And how can TA give us a clue to pick up what's going on? One of the big building blocks of TA is the theory of script. So what's the meaning we make about ourselves, others, and the world? So it's a very internal, personal piece. But as we know in supervision, the key work is often, mostly, about where the personal intrudes into the professional. What are those blind spots? What's going on in the dynamics of our supervisee and their clients and the system that's sometimes getting in the way of them doing really good work? So TA and supervision, in my experience over, TA for 20 years, coaching for probably about 15 or so of those in supervision shortly thereafter. It's just been a beautiful partnership. To remind you of the seven-eyed model, and Cochrane and Newton have actually called it an eight-eyed model in their latest book. I'm sure I don't need to go through all the modes of supervision, but where I find TA particularly useful is in that fifth eye, or the fifth mode. What's the supervisory relationship and the supervisor's own process, that sixth mode? What's going on in the supervisor in the relationship that can really be a clue to the dynamics that might be going on in the coach, number 4, and then the coach's process with clients, her clients, and the system. Cochrane and Newton, it's really interesting, added that eighth eye to say there's actually something even wider than the wider context, and that's the philosophy, connectedness, awareness, values, spirituality. That would all fit into that eighth eye. And certainly I've noticed during our lockdown moments and COVID this year that maybe that's the dynamic that often shows up now in work as a supervisor. So the parallel process, I'm sure you all know about this, sometimes called the Convergent Process. Just to remind you of how this shows up. It's based on the understanding that there's an inevitable unconscious process at play in the supervisory relationship. And the key is for the supervisor to stay open, to experience what's going on, to experience the whole of the person of the coach in supervision. And what the supervisor notices in her or himself is potentially unconsciously being picked up from the coach, which will then mirror the coach and client relationship, which will then inevitably be that same dynamic in the wider system. So it's like the piece of gold in the supervision, working positively with that parallel process, either implicitly by the questioning or the modeling of a positive process, or explicitly by saying, I'm noticing I'm feeling pulled into be doing your thinking for you. I wonder what's going on here. And that's where the real work of supervision can begin. This is the diagram as Newton and Cochrane have used it, which I think for me really captures what it's about. That key issue in the top left is what the piece is in the system. It's probably what the coach is finding in their work with their clients, and it shines back right through the supervisors picking it up, and it's related to the work context. So if in supervision that key issue is noticed and worked with, it shines back into the coaching and it shines back into the work context. So the whole of the system is positively impacted. I'm going to come back to the whole group and pause for a minute or two for any brief questions before I share the first model with you that I find really useful to notice parallel process. So far, so good. Cool, I'm seeing some thumbs up. Great. So let's go back to the slides. So it's all very well for supervisors to be told you've got to look for a parallel process, but how do we do that? What's the antennae or the lens that we can use to pick this up? And one of them from TA that I found really useful is called the OK communication model. A colleague and I, Mandisa Mbaligonsi, we wrote it up in the journal in 2014, and it actually grew out of some of my professional work with community care workers in South Africa and helping them to do self-care and be aware of the dynamics with their patients that they were we're caring for. So I'll talk you through it. You will notice the 3 circles that are kind of the trademark of TA, the parents, the adults, and the child. And you might remember some TA models that had nurturing parents, controlling parents, natural child, adapted child. And it tended to be one side of parent is good, the other side is not so good. And this model, building on some of my TA colleagues, is saying actually they positive modes and negative modes in each. And the positive is shorthand for respectful. TA's got a model saying, I'm okay, you're okay. In South Africa, we talk about Ubuntu. I am through you. It's that I can respect myself and respect you. And the negative modes would be somebody's not okay in my inner way of thinking about myself in relation to the other. So if we start with one of the parent modes, there's a useful, respectful way of being with people and clients, and that's the nurturing mode. And I put three words there that really sum it up: encouraging, compassionate, comforting. But that can also be done disrespectfully. And the TA mode there is called marshmallowing. This is doing too much, trying to be too helpful for our supervisees. On the other side of the parent, this was the old-fashioned critical parent. It can be the dominating mode. So I know it's right for you, over-controlling, quite judgmental, punishing. But there's a useful part there, which is the structuring mode, being assertive, consistent, reliable, in a really respectful way. If we move down to the child's ego states, the positive side of the free child has got the title of spontaneous child. So this is where we're curious, creative, they're genuine feelings. We allow ourselves to experience all the emotions. But this can also be shown up as an immature way of being, quite egocentric. Maybe as a supervisor, we want to come across as really clever here. And even though our supervisor is doing really good work, we've got to make sure that we have a lot to say about what's going on. That is more about us than about our supervisee. The other side of the child is the cooperative mode. So there are ways of interacting where somebody in their structuring parent is setting down maybe some boundaries, and we cooperate, we collaborate. But that can be done from a not okay way with 2 sides of a coin. So either someone goes into their submissive child, they're anxious, they're withdrawn, think supervisee, when the supervisor maybe is doing too much telling, they just want to please the supervisor, they stop doing their own thinking. Or the other side of the coin is resistant, and they just push back and rebel. You know, how do you know what's right for me, as it were? Then the adult in the middle is talked about as the accounting mode. So that's being really present, thinking, problem solving, using experience. And the key thing that I added to the model is what I've called the okay box. So drawn a box around the adults and the 2 positive modes of parent, the 2 positive modes of child. And the key is that when we, if you're like dancing in the box, we're responding, we're present in the here and now. And it's like we've got one foot metaphorically in our adults, and moment by moment, we're deciding, do I put the other foot in a bit of structuring? Do I need to be firm and assertive? Think ethical issues, showing their showing up. It's no use saying, oh, I'm sure it'll all be all right. There's time for a supervisor to name, hey, we need to look at this. Is it time to be encouraging and nurturing? The other side of the positive parent. Is it time to be collaborating together, maybe thinking through something together? Is it time to be playful, creative, work with genuine feelings? but the key thing is metaphorically, one foot's in the adult. So we're choosing to flow between all these modes in what's needed right now for good work, for the client, for the client's client and their system and the wider system in the world. If, as a supervisor, we dip out of the box, it's more about reacting. And we've lost touch with the here and now. And this is where transference, countertransference, we've gone somewhere else. Maybe our supervisee reminds us of someone who was uncooperative in another area of our work. So we get into judgment and over-controlling. Maybe our supervisor is feeling quite intimidating and we jump into our anxious, compliant child place and we lose our potency. So the key for noticing a parallel process is, now what's happening? I'm feeling something's happening out of the okay box. We're not in the present moment. There's dynamics going on that can be a key to name what the key issue is and to work with it. So just to give you a kind of metaphor, remember TA models are metaphors. Supervisors got all these ways of interacting, as has the supervisee. And the arrows are showing all the options of the interactions. TA talks about them as transactions that we might have within a supervision conversation. And just to play with a few of them, ideally, we keep our transactions, what TA now talks about as the integrating adult to the integrating adult. It's in the box, present-centered, mindful, aware. What's going on in the dynamic now? And do I dance? Can I dance and use a positive side of parent and child to match my supervisee? Sometimes what happens, maybe a supervisee comes in as quite a compliant child, trying to please the supervisor, and that just invites the supervisor to go into their marshmallowing parent and say, oh, I'm sure it's all fine, get quite reassuring, which actually isn't challenging the coach, the supervisee to grow in any way. And sometimes this could be the supervisee comes in quite resistant and rebellious, and that could invite, it's kind of what buttons being pushed in the supervisor, that could invite quite a dominating parent to be quite judgmental of what's going on. So what I've tried to show you now is each human being, and in our context, supervisor and supervisee, have got all these ways within us of how we can interact with each other. The names parent, adult, child are with capital letters because they indicate a state of mind, not a biological reality. And by noticing the shifts in ego states, it's one way that we can really get a sense of what's going on. Where might a parallel process be unfolding here? And work with that with our clients. Let me go back to that slide, and I'm going to invite you to take a screenshot of it or a photograph of it, because we'll have a few moments for questions in the big group, and then there'll be some time for you to go into a small group and talk about how this awareness of people moving between ego states could be useful in supervision. So if you to take it with you into your room for reference, if it's useful, capture it in some way. Let's go back. What's your sense of that model that I've described probably quite rapidly?
Powerful.
Powerful.
I really like the box you put round and taking from the parent box and the child box and integrating it into the adult box. I really like that. Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
You know, the old version, people used to say, who wants to be in the adult? Because it was like, oh, critical parents bad, you've all got to be adults. And it's like, how boring is that? But as TA developed over the years, they realized actually we need to integrate the nuances from the parent and the child. And that makes the adult this amazing place to play, because it's fluid and flexible and integrating and bringing all our lived experiences, but the useful ones, the contaminated pieces that's more about our own stuff for the working process, we can just partition that and take that to our own supervisors to work with.
For me, Karen, this model, this box around it really brings it to life and makes it whole, the whole process whole rather than separate. And I love it.
Brilliant. So I'm getting some senses of people being quite, finding it quite inviting to think around it in this way. So here's a possible question for you to talk about in your small groups. You might want to, in like 2 minutes, with that model, kind of score yourself out of 10. How often do you, how would you rate yourself out of 10 in each of those modes as you supervise? Because we've all got our own patterns. Are you more in the kind of mode of let's see if it's going right, and what are you doing right, and are there ethical issues, and let's be clear about this? Do you play in the creative mode as well? What sort of transactions do you notice in your supervision, and how might you actually pick up a clue to a parallel process that might be emerging between you and your supervisee? Lily, I'm thinking time-wise, let's go for 10 minutes in the breakout room. Okay. Welcome back, everybody. We've got about 8 or 9 minutes to get some feedback. What did you learn about yourself? What are some more questions you might have? And Lily's going to help me manage the process, because she said you're an enthusiastic group, and let's streamline it so that everyone doesn't start talking at once. So Lily,
okay, so the request,
how you'll manage it.
Thank you. The request is, if you'd like to have a conversation and speak into the space, please put your name in chat, and then in the order that you're in chat will be the order that we take the questions up to the time that we have. So go ahead and put your name in chat, please. Thanks.
So I see Jonathan.
Martine Jonathan.
Martine.
Yeah, well, no wonder Martine and Jonathan. I'm happy I had the laugh of Michelle for that. What we shared was quite interesting is in TA, there is that Burns belief that we should share the knowledge, we should share our knowledge with the patient, because he was doing therapy. And so debunking parallel process by using I feel in my child, blah, 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 whatever, or I feel normative parent on the negative side, does that ring a bell for you, etc., is a very good way to identify and also let emerge parallel process.
Sure, and I think it depends. If our supervisee knows the framework, it's really useful to name it. If they don't, it might be a way that just informs your thinking. And sometimes we can use TA as a thinking framework without even naming the jargon. I often would use it if people didn't know it and they were interested to use it. I would literally show them the model, quick 10 minutes, and then we've got it in our toolbox as a way of thinking about what they're doing. Because you're absolutely right. Byrne said we must empower our clients to think for themselves. So it could be either way, explicitly or implicitly.
Okay, Jonathan, and anyone else that isn't speaking, can you please mute yourselves? Thank you.
Jonathan?
So I had a question that came up. In the group, we just did the exercise, but my question was the implications, and maybe this is just basic to the model, of seeing them as circles that don't overlap and saying that the positive pieces are not part of adult. And I'm just wondering, maybe it's more of a question. But
that's a lovely question. Yeah. And remember, these diagrams are kind of metaphors, and it's the very reason that there's the box around the two parents, the two child modes, and the adult is a way of saying they actually are completely together. The integrating adult is the way we speak about the adult now, is the whole of the box. So it's the richness of the two positive parent modes, the two positive child modes used in the adults, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Nice distinction. Anne, you'd like the floor? Anyone else who'd like a comment, please put your name in chat.
Yes, in our group, we said that we could use this graph as this model to map where our coaches stand with his or her clients, and where as supervisor and supervisee we stand, just to see where the parallel processes are or stand.
Yes.
And that was
brilliant.
That was a good point to see, even if when we react, when we are out of the box, just use this model to explain what's happening to us and what could happen with the coachee.
Absolutely, that's kind of my thinking, that we could map. And remember that it's often, I mean, moment by moment, if you had a map, even our conversation now in what's this, 30, 45 seconds, we might be moving from parent to child, adult to adult, you know, every moment, every nuance of word and body language, it's kind of moving around, but we'll get an overall theme of like, okay, what's my tendency in the supervisory relationship and with our clients. Lovely. Thanks, Anne. Was there
any last question or comment before we move on?
Lily, I have a question. We had a discussion in our room that we didn't quite get to finish. It was Michelle said that you can only work on what's happening in the here and now. And I'm not sure, because that was the piece that we didn't finish, but my understanding was if you move comfortably in the integrated parent, in the integrated adult, then you might not sense that you are actually using something from, you know, somewhere else. So in a way, it would be helpful if you were moving around the borders, almost tipping into the other side, in order to be aware of anything that's happening, and would then have to check, is it my piece or is it potentially a parallel?
Yes, yes. And I think you're making a really good point, because it's when we feel ourselves drawn to be outside of the box that probably our supervisee is outside of the box, and it is more about past stuff. So we don't explore the past, but we notice the dynamic and go, I wonder what's going on there. But we work with it in the integrating adult in the present moment. And I think what we're going to move into shortly, looking at the drama triangle and the winner's triangle, adds another layer to this model about how, when we feel something funny is going on here, we outside of the box, and we're getting onto a drama triangle, because that's where our client's inviting us to go. So yeah, you're really spot on your thinking, and that like living on the edge of the box is probably the place where the growth really happens. And the courage to be there as the supervisor, but don't be pulled out with both feet out of the box. Dip a toe over the line to suss out what's going on. I love that image. You're making me almost get a different metaphor now to explain it to people, like dip over the edge is really good. Right, I would like to move on now to the drama triangle. That, if anything, it's probably a model that many of you know very, very well. It's one of the foundational TA models. And there's a positive version of it called the winner's triangle. So holding in mind that first model and overlaying it with this, let's see what sense you make of it. So the drama triangle is saying that we make meaning of who we are in our life. That's our script. And then we do our best to keep our script in place. And we play psychological games. And there's 3 roles that we get into in our life and in our work as coaches, as consultants, as supervisors. So here's a summary of 3 roles. They also got capital letters because they're an internal approach, not a real life rescuer as an ambulance driver. So psychologically, one of the roles is getting into a rescuer where we do too much for other people, we think for them, we take more of the power and the responsibility. And we do this because we've been hooked by someone going, oh, I can't do it. So the victim stands in that sense of I'm helpless, I can't do it. So they're either going to look for a rescuer to do it for them, which is that top right, or they're going to look for a persecutor who's going to say, you really are useless. So believes they can make others do things, comes from that superior position, discounts other people's feelings. And the classic game dynamic is when maybe client comes, supervisor comes going, oh, it's really so hard. I thought I was on top of this dynamic, but I just keep on feeling like I'm losing my power. And then supervisor goes into rescue saying, it is quite difficult. I know that dynamic, and gosh, it must be really hard for you, and starts rescuing. That's really no use at all. Recently in a coach training, we started playing with what would it look like for the in the role of coach or supervisor. So rescuer cares too much for the supervisor, perhaps does some over reassuring. No, I'm sure you're doing good work. I'm listening to some recordings of supervision for a supervision diploma course at the moment. So I'm really hearing some learner supervisees saying, you're just not realizing that you're doing good work. And that gets in the way of the supervisee learning. Maybe colludes with the supervisee about things are hard, or does the thinking for the supervisee. If the supervisor goes into victim, might be doubting own abilities, anxious not to offend the supervisee, so quite tentative in challenging. Or like, I'm the supervisor here, so makes lots of suggestions, tells them what needs to happen, even suggests the area that the supervisee ought to explore. So none of those are really that useful. And as you've been hearing me describe the 3 roles, you'll probably know in your heart of hearts, if you're honest, oh my goodness, one role is probably where you recognize you often go to when you're stressed. And when it all goes wrong and the game reaches its payoff, you probably go to another one. So maybe you start as rescuer, and when the victim gets fed up and shouts at you, you then go to victim. Or you might start as persecutor, or you might start as victim. So we all have a favorite first position, and when it goes wrong, we go to second position. So what can we do instead? And this is quite a few years afterwards. Steve Kaufman in '68 wrote up about the drama triangle, and Choi in 1990 said, actually, there's a good intention behind each aspect. So instead of rescuer, we can be responsive and caring. So show genuine concern, willing to help. It's a 50-50 thing. I can support you, but you can take your own power. Instead of a victim going, oh, it's so hard, I really can't do anything here, actually to voice be vulnerable or voice their feelings or what they need. Believe that they're okay, can change, actually ask for what we need instead of just playing the poor me role. And then instead of the persecutor, to be powerful and assertive. So to name that things can change. There's firmness here. You can see that in the parent, the parent that's setting the boundaries, but without being judgmental as the persecutor is. So if we translate that to what would the supervisor be doing, in the responsive place, there's that trusting place that is built, empathy, a strong presence, and really picks up the unconscious personal dynamics and doesn't just tune into the coaching techniques and how that could be different. Really is responsive to that human being in the person that's sitting in front of them. Vulnerable, risks sharing their intuitive sense of the dynamic, willing to use their own inner process to work with the parallel process. And then the assertive piece, I think this would be particularly in where there are ethical issues. There are times when supervisors have to name what's going on. So it's comfortable to challenge the supervisee. That the shorthand I plus you plus is shorthand from that attitude of I'm okay, you're okay. And if I quickly flip back to this model, I'm sure you're all working out where, and I'm going to invite somebody to just unmute and say, where does the rescuer live? In which of these modes of communication?
Marshmallow.
Yeah. So, oh, let me think for you. You poor thing. I'll do it for you. Where does the victim live in these communication modes?
Compliant.
Yeah. So down there, anxious, withdrawn. Oh, it's too hard. I can't do it. Where does the persecutor live?
Dominating.
You got it. So can you see drama triangle? I guess if one was clever, one could superimpose it, but all the drama triangle roles are somebody's not okay, out of the box. Whereas the responsive mode in the winner's triangle, when shows that genuine concern, where does that go to?
Nurturing.
Nurturing. And instead of the victim mode, that voicing, being open, where does that live?
Cooperative.
Cooperative.
Cooperative, and maybe even showing my genuine feelings in the spontaneous child. And the powerful, assertive place, but in a respectful way.
Structuring.
Structuring.
Yeah. So winner's triangle is made manifest in our communication styles that are playing in the box. 1 foot always in the integrating adult, pulling in the richness of all the flavors of adult when we take in the positive parent and child. Drama triangle dynamics, out of awareness, not about the here and now, more about old stuff in the dynamics of both ourselves and our clients. But they pop in. And when we notice them as supervisor with our supervisees or as coaches with our clients, we're the ones who can go, hang on, I'm playing in the box, but I'm feeling such a strong pull to care too much for my clients. I wonder what's going on there. Inevitably, they've gone to one of the negative modes. You're feeling a pull there. With awareness, you can go, aha, I don't need to do that. Let's stay here and play in the box. Let me pause for a moment for any questions. If you just kind of wave a hand, and there's going to be time to talk about it in small groups again, where you might get even deeper learning when you tussle it around with a colleague or two. Someone's talking about interesting impacts for mentor coaching as well. And I think that came in earlier on. Yes, indeed. Okay, so here's an invitation to basically, Lily, are we still in the? Are they still in the same groups? Are they at the moment?
They are, but I can move them around if you'd like.
You know what I'm thinking? May I change my mind and ask you to keep them in the same groups?
All right.
Some people said the time was a bit short to really get. They wanted more conversation. So I'm thinking to actually build on your previous conversation. The question is, how can you link the winner's triangle and the OK model, as I briefly spoke about, but really make it relevant to your work as a supervisor or a coach? What would you be doing actually in a conversation? And we can take 15 minutes for this group. Lily, if you...
Okay, there might be a couple of people different because there's a couple of people that have joined us, but we will have I think 12
would
groups.
You, excuse me, would you mind putting up that slide again for the supervisor supervisee in the winner's triangle?
Yes, certainly.
We have the comparison of the other one, and I just wanted to. Yeah.
That one.
Actually, the one before it, I think supervisee. Was it the one before it? So I can take a picture. So I'll just take a quick picture. Yeah, that's okay. Let me just take.
So that's the winners one, and then this is the drama triangle one.
Right.
-1.
That's it.
This one, +1, winners. Yeah. Okay.
Perfect. That's it. Thank you.
Cool.
Right.
I am very happy to send the slides at the end as well, and I'm sure Lily, you'd be happy to circulate that.
Yes, we'll post it on the website for everyone. Yep. Thanks, Karen. Here
Lily,
we go.
Can I ask a quick question in the plenary to Karen?
Yep.
This is Mason, New York. Hi, Karen. So
Hi.
I was just wondering if you could share some thoughts on drama, winner's triangle, and the OK box, and linking it to I-7 and 8. You know, and the key issue. I'm curious, you know, what your thoughts are there.
Oh, gosh, that's an interesting question. My sense is that the microcosm might well be similar. The parallel process will go from the microcosm to the macrocosm, and 7 and 8 are those wider systems, and I think vice versa. So I think whenever we're learning a model, it's like we can't really, to learn it, we maybe separate it into its component parts, but it almost must be enveloped by the context. What's the culture in the context, for example? Is it quite a persecutory context in which the client is working, in which the coach is working, and now they're in supervision? So that's my off-the-cuff thinking about that. And I guess the spirituality 8I part is almost the quality of beingness in the relationship that holds the process. Maybe it might be explicitly spoken about, but more often that quality of beingness, almost not what I do, but I'm sort of doing that with my fingers, because I think sometimes you can't really name it, but clients and supervisors can actually it's quite tangible, and they feel it, that inspires them to do their own thinking. Is that okay? As a start, at least.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I think here I do a lot of work in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, and I can see mirroring in coaches who either become super empowered or become affected and helpless, you know, sort of mixed in with their identity and what's happening in the national context. So, or maybe the organization that they're coaching within, you know, and how they're reacting or not reacting. So I saw a lot of that sort of pooling at multiple levels.
Absolutely. And if you think of scripts is our, comes from our family, our culture,
Yeah.
So all those very early beliefs that have been entrenched, that internalized oppression, is all sitting there. And how do we work with that in coaching and supervision? That still keeps it present-centered work.
Yeah.
But these are the external clues to what's going on underneath the surface. These
Exactly.
two models.
Yeah, and your
Great,
relationship
lovely
with social
conversation.
responsibility or not, and power or not, right? And that blind
Exactly.
spot. Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah, lovely. Okay, shall we do the, I think we've still got time for 15 minutes and a bit of conversation at the end.
All right, here we go.
Thanks, Lily. Comments, reflections, questions from that last piece of discussion that you did, joining the two models together or whatever else you've done with it. Lily, it probably works best if people put their names in so we get the order.
Okay, so if you'd like to chat, please put your name in, or sorry, if you'd like to have a conversation, please put your name in chat. And also, if you're not speaking, please put your mute button on. Somehow I can't mute right now. So Sylviane, we'll start with you.
Hi. Thank you, Karen, for this very rich model. The question we had with my team is that I was very clear about the drama triangle and the three roles here, three positioning. And then when you're adding another layer with the winners triangle, it's almost like it allows me to create a very positive story.
Yes.
About, well, I'm being vulnerable. I express my feelings, and that's okay. But however, if we make the parallel, I'm still being a victim here. So it's like if the winner triangle is giving me the perfect excuse and justification to be borderline.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. The original drama triangle, Steve Kaufman always said there's 10% of good intention behind each of those roles. But because we're trying to defend our hurts from early on, we show them out in a drama triangle role. And the very nature of it is somebody's not okay. It's done out of awareness. I don't deliberately go, I'm going to play the victim now or the rescue. It's out of awareness. It's our unconscious pattern for keeping our script. So it's out of the box. And we're either feeling not okay or making someone else not okay. But when we step on the winner's triangle, the metaphor is to say that there's a deep change in our script. So if we're only pretending it's okay to voice, but we're still feeling like a victim, we kind of still on the drama triangle in our script. So the work for the coach or the supervisor is often in asking what permissions the person needs to be bold enough to know that they can name what they need. It's not just a paper over the cracks and change a word. It's what are those deep permissions that the person can start crafting for themselves to step into a more, I can be my own person. I can believe in myself as being okay. So maybe that adds a bit of the depth to what it actually signifies.
Thank you. And I guess the notion of control here was also raised in our team. So, being self-aware and fully aligned head, heart, and body is a way to make sure that we are responding and not reacting.
Yes,
but,
yes.
And
carry on.
But you know, you could come with very good intentions and still be driven unconsciously by, let's say, a desire to control because you're structuring.
Yeah. So it's that fine line, and I've often run almost a whole day workshop on crossing the line. What's the subtle difference in the okay communication model between being on the negative controlling side of the line and the positive structuring side of the line? It's an intention that we hold about ourselves and others. It shows up in our language. We can do the same task, but it's that subtlety, often in language, that indicates disrespect of self or others, or respect. And I think this is why, as supervisors, we use our own supervisors, because, hey, we get hooked into stuff as well. And I don't think it's done once and for all. It's a constant reflection, deeper and deeper.
And very subtle.
Lovely questions from your room. Thanks, Sylvie-Anne.
So I'd like to invite Tara to come in, if you would, Tara, to talk about the operating system that you've been chatting about, and also Jonathan, because there was an element of racism in that conversation. So I'd love to hear those two, if you would, please.
Lily, you're putting me on the spot. Okay, the operating systems that I was referring to, so I don't know a ton about it, but I do know, like, some of the Leadership Circle profile does a bit of work on this, and I just feel into it in the sense of it's also around embodiment work and somatics, but that we have an operating system through a lens that we create, whether it's culturally or personality or learned behavior, conditioning, whatever it may be, but we look at the world through our own lens and our belief systems that show up as a result of that. And then we operate in reaction to that. But then there's this other kind of shift that happens where you're in it and you might be, for example, in victim mode, and you realize when you overlay the winner's triangle over top of that, that there's and somebody else spoke to it, that you can look at it through a more positive lens. And so in sequence, you can recognize the old operating system that you were operating by, but also the new one that you're moving towards. And you're kind of in between the two, going, what was working best for me? What's going to be of best service? And so to be able to sense into it is really helpful. Is that what?
Lovely. Yeah. You've expressed it beautifully. One of my TA colleagues talks about liminality. How can we support people that are, one foot has already left the old operating system and the other foot is about to be in the new one, but they're betwixt and between. It can be quite a scary place, but a really powerful place of learning, that liminal space in learning and growth and development. Thanks, Tara. There was someone else that you were calling in.
It was me, I believe. So it started with a discussion about how certain roles such as victim might actually seem to serve someone in the short term, and how understanding what role it plays for them, for example, not having to take responsibility, might seem to make sense to them, even if they're not aware of it. And then we moved into more of an I-7, where if you're brought up with systemic racism, then it might make perfect sense that you would show up with more of a victim attitude. And then especially if we come in as white or privileged coaches to tell them about how they shouldn't feel like such a victim, that's probably not really taking the system into account or going to be very helpful. So how do we work with it?
Really good point. And I think TA, when you link kind of internal ego state and get a sense of what has been internalized. I think to tell someone that they shouldn't be a victim is probably not useful ever, but to start unpacking the beliefs. I'm thinking about my work in South Africa with in the apartheid era, and my work now with people of color, Black people. It's often in the modeling of hearing what they are saying in a workshop. I'm thinking of a particular workshop I did a while ago, and inviting them to ask questions and do their own thinking. That is more powerful for them to realize they can find a voice than saying, oh, don't be silly, come on, step up to the plate, don't be a victim. So it's in that respectful relationship, I think is part of it, or explicit work around racism and what are the beliefs that the different groupings hold. I don't think this is ever meant to be a quick fix. It's a way of thinking about things, but you bring in such important layers of complexity that need to be accounted for, and maybe there are different frameworks that would add to the thinking as well. Thanks, Jonathan. Lily, I know we're at the last 5 minutes. I'd love to share a final slide. If TA's really grabbed you, I'm really excited that tomorrow the proofs will be back with Routledge. I've been invited to write a book in the coaching distinctive features, and it's a small book that makes it really accessible. 30 chapters, 1,000 words per chapter, and I've described in really succinct ways about 10 or 12 TA models, and then the second part of the book is application in coaching, and many examples of coaching conversations. So you might want to look up for that if TA has piqued your interest. I've really enjoyed the interaction and your thinking and your questioning. So thank you for having me as your guest this morning. It's night for me, but I know it's different times all over the world.
Yes, I think it's bedtime almost for you. So thank you so much, Karen, for coming and presenting with us. I've had a lot of both personal, private messages, and there's lots in the chat about how engaged people are with this topic. So stay tuned. We'd love to invite you back in some way or form. And so let's have that conversation. And
absolutely, great.
Let me pass it to Damien. Anything to add, Damien?
No, a couple of announcements, Karen. It was a great session. I really enjoyed the session really much, as I heard other people too. We hope that to have you back soon. A couple of announcements. We're working with Lily, Francine, who's here too, and Joe Girolamo, who worked for ICF in a book on coaching supervision. So you may receive some invitations to participate in some of the surveys we are doing it for different chapters. I am working in one chapter on virtual coaching. Some of you have already participated in that in the past. So I have a request for the supervisors who are in the Americas, North, Central, or South America. If you can please support us by answering the survey. So I put the link in the chat room. Next month, we have Sam McGill coming to talk about the poets of coaching and supervision, poetry. Lily, do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, December 14th at 8 o'clock for 1 hour. Sam McGill from Coaching Supervision Academy, North America, or America's group will be talking about the poetics of coaching supervision. So invite everyone back to that. Same Zoom room all the time. So in case you're panicking looking for the room, this is the room that we meet in.
Tomorrow there is the EMCC conference for providers. So I hope that everybody knows about it. It's a 24-hour event. Some of the people who are here are going to be presenting, including Michelle Morale. I see Liz was here before, Lily, Ciro, and I were presenting together on group supervision. We have people from the cohort, Petra, Cecile, who are in this call are going to be presenting too. I don't know if I'm missing somebody who's here, who's also presenting. And also we are planning the conference for next year. So we already started to confirm all of the speakers. Lily, do you want to share? some of the news for next year's conference.
Yeah, so Peter Hawkins will be coming to talk about supervising team coaches and do a demo. We've got Mesa on the line here talking about diversity in supervision, and Janet Harvey will be doing a demonstration. And who else is on this call that we have?
Pam's not on the call, but Pam coming.
Thank you. Pam McLean will be coming to have a conversation around doing a demonstration as well. So she's coming back.
We have Eva Hitchpont, who was in the call
Eva
too at the
is here as well. She'll do some body work. Fiona Adamson will be talking about how to take care of ourselves in this crazy world that we live in. And of course, we might be able to convince Karen Pratt to come as well. We'll see what goes on there. So hope you'll all be able to join us for that. So with that, we'll close and stay safe, and we'll see you all on December 14th. Thanks for coming.
Good seeing everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.